So, I'm Kathleen, and I'm one of the trainers, and we are so happy to have you here for our presentation tonight. This is a complimentary webinar about our upcoming training program. And so just so you know, the first half is going to be presentation, and then the second half will be some questions and answers. So you can feel free to put some questions in the chat to make sure that we answer those. And we will be done at 6:30, so you can continue on your evening and enjoy the rest of your evening. We know we really want to value your time and appreciate you being here. So the next slide, please. So again, welcome. Tonight, we're going to learn about the value and benefit of the training as an end-of-life doula. And really what we hear most often is that people say that they feel like they're answering a calling. It's really the number one reason people follow through and reach out to us. And this can be both personally as well as professionally. And for a lot of people, it's about learning how to support loved ones when they're dying or when that time comes, anticipating that that's coming. Maybe somebody who has a chronic illness in the family or has been diagnosed with a terminal illness and wants to know how to be the best caregiver. Or maybe it's an opportunity to really face our own mortality, and that's what leads to people joining and inquiring about being an end-of-life doula and wanting to do it in a better way. For some people, they've witnessed a death and dying process that didn't look so great. And so wanting to be a part of a community that's open and willing to discuss that. And then for some people, really by talking about death and dying, it really helps to learn how to live more meaningfully. And it gives us an idea about what's most important to us in our life. And for some of us, we just have a lot of passion at end of life care. And for some of us, we're really, especially after COVID, there's some clarity about this need with caregiving and wanting to be a part of a community that's open and willing to discuss end of life care and really be a part of a paradigm shift that's happening with trying to bring death and dying back home and away from making it a medical event and wanting to be with other like-minded people. Next slide. So tonight, we're going to learn, you're going to meet all of us trainers and get to know us a bit about our backgrounds and what we do, and also the history of the end-of-life doula and what it means to be a doula and this shift that we're seeing and why now, why death doulas now and end-of-life doulas now. Well, you'll learn a little bit more about the skills and qualities and what it may look like to work as an end-of-life doula. And also, why would you choose our training over other trainings? What to expect with our training, and then also how to sign up for upcoming in-person training this May, but also the opportunities to be able to take the training in the fall online or our next in-person training, and all those are available. All right, next slide. So this is us. Who are we? We are the Gentle Passage Doula Collective. And really, we are a community of committed, dedicated end-of-life doulas that are very interested in bringing the highest quality training now that is really practical and has the philosophy of integrating the tools that we're training you to bring to people at end of life. And we have been together for over 3 years. And during those 3 years, we have been providing virtual online death cafes to the community and around the world. Actually, when you do virtual, it's pretty far reaching. We also go out into the community and educate people about who end-of-life doulas are and advocate for employment for end-of-life doulas And specifically, we have one of the number one requests we got as end of life doulas is why aren't you guys trainers? And why isn't there a program in the Pacific Northwest? And so that's how this is started. We started our training this January, and we are there's 3 of us that work in higher education with adult learning in mind, which is that integrative application in our own lives. And 3 of us are nurses and coaches. There's a dietitian and a social worker. And really, we have the goal of having an end of life doula in every senior care community, hospice, and palliative care team. And for me, I'm really hoping personally that the end of life doula becomes like a household name, like the birth doula, making those rites of passage in life just as supported and beautiful as possible, that we should be surrounded by our loved ones and cared for in our community. And now I'm happy to hand you off to Colleen, who's another trainer, and she's going to talk about the history of doulas and our intentions offering this training with this paradigm shift that we're seeing right now.
So thanks, Kathleen. So Ram Dass said this phrase, "We are all just walking each other home." And a book was written in the same name. So the thing that this tells me is that aside from us turning inward, and looking at our whole selves, that's part of walking ourselves home. But we also are walking everyone else home. And so what I started to reflect upon is dying is frightening for people. And we are living, so we don't know what it's like to die. And one afternoon I was pondering this, and I was thinking back on my time as a child, and I looked over at one of the pictures, and there were my parents, one on each side of me as I was a toddler and just learning to walk, and they were holding my hand on either side. And I started to reflect on, well, we can think they were walking me home, or because I was born, that's one bookend of life, and the other is death. And so they're walking me home, but toward living at the time. And so I fast forwarded to my father's dying. And I remember the last time I took him outside, and he said goodbye to his rose bushes and his plants, and he touched each one very poignantly. And as I think back on that, I was walking him home. And then 5 years later, we fast forward, my mother was dying. And she was in a hospice at the time. And I sat with her the night before, and I was vigiling as she was just breathing. And I was with her, and I was walking her home. The next morning, as she took her last breath, my sister and I were by her, and we were walking her home. The staff washed her body, placed rose petals around it, a quilt over it, left her head uncovered, and my sister and I wheeled her down a long hallway that was illuminated on both sides by electric candlelight, walking her home. So end-of-life doulas provide non-medical support and companionship to the dying person and their loved ones, walking them home. That's what that means for me as a doula. So in this next slide, and yes, it is true, this is to avoid going into therapy. I'm just joking right now. This one person, that's us. I'm terrified of death. And then you got poor death saying, everybody hates me. Well, maybe they wouldn't if we talked to death more and befriend it. So what this is about is really normalizing death. We live in a bubble of denial. And we want to make death part of life. So one nurse tells a story of a woman coming in for chemotherapy. And as she looks at her, she has end-of-life symptoms, and the woman doesn't seem to be aware of that. So the nurse asked her colleagues, well, what's going on here? Why doesn't she know? And her colleague says, well, One doctor feels comfortable talking about death and the other one doesn't. And she happens to have the one who doesn't. So this really drove this nurse. She was stunned, and she decided she was going to quit. And she wrote a book, and the book is called Love Your Life to Death. And she says everyone should have a self-care toolbox of wills and funeral plans, advanced care planning, write down your beliefs about life and death. And so in order to normalize death, you have to realize that talking about death won't kill you. And the goal of the death positive movement is to take it out of the closet. And you can do that by attending death cafes and having people talk in small discussion groups. You can talk over dinner. Death over dinner is a nice one. The pandemic has just changed us all. It has brought death forefront to the point where the millennials now are extremely aware of the fact that they may die. And normalizing death, when we think of it, is crucial to our wellness. Because why? Well, when you talk about death, you're not as afraid of it. Doesn't mean you accept everything, but your anxiety level goes down. And talking about death influences how we choose to live our lives. Each step of the way, we're more aware. That's what it's done for me. So normalizing death is crucial to wellness, and it gives us a chance too, as we can talk about it, we can approach our parents, we can approach our loved ones, we can approach our family, we can approach our siblings, and we're just more comfortable with it. And in order to do that, you have to take time to reflect on it and think about it and talk to people who are close to you and educate yourself, read the books. There are so many good books out there right now. The field is just exploding. And attend a death positive event. Find them. Join your community. Start one. And that's what you do to normalize death, some of it. The history of end-of-life doulas is historically the role of the doula was about, it goes back to ancient times where women who gave birth at home were supported by someone called midwife or other women in the community tending to their care. And they reached out for their friends to support them and support them in the birth process. Well, the same was going on with the death movement pre-Civil War and in ancient times. You laid the body out in the parlor, as they used to call it, or the living room, or the body was there. The community came in, your loved ones, your family were there for you to support you during this time. They were sitting vigil. They provide comfort care. They arranged for all the spiritual, the religious ritual that would go on, and all the emotional support, because you have all those people there. So our society used to care for family at home. We want to bring death back home, wherever that means, because sometimes it's not going to be in the home if you look at the recent statistics yet. So birth doulas preceded death doulas by about 20 years. And in the late 90s, end-of-life doulas started to appear. And a former hospice nurse was one of the first people to develop the concept of a death doula by accompanying her mother through her illness and her own death. And then it went on into New York University and Medical Center, where they basically, had death doulas. So I think that's about all I want to say right now on the history. Yeah. So we'll turn it over to who's next? Kathy?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I want to talk about the idea that conscious dying, conscious living is actually a community event, not a medical event. Dying's not a medical event in and of itself. In fact, oftentimes throughout the last probably 75 years plus, is people are actually spending more money on medical care during the last 6 months of their life rather than any time in their previous history of medical needs. The other thing that's really fascinating about the idea that we want people in the 30 years plus that I worked in skilled nursing and healthcare, folks always said that they want to die at home. But so many people have wanted to, loved ones, family members, spouses, end up, I want to be in the hospital. I want everything done for them possible. And what the end-of-life doula is really helping folks do is begin to honor the wishes of the person who may have a terminal disease, who is approaching end of life. So just remember, it's not a medical event. It is a life cycle event. Why, would you like to go to the next slide, please? So why death doulas now? Well, we are in the midst of a silver tsunami. For most of us, that is a population of baby boomers, as most of us might be, and that's about 76 million strong. When I started in healthcare, we were about 32 to 34 million strong, and we were serving Bonnie, Colleen, Kathleen, Maureen, we were serving a community of the silent generation and the greatest generation. And so that is just doubled. The other thing that are happening right now is the amount of caregivers in the United States, unpaid caregivers, are approximately 43 million. They are providing care in the home environment. And it is a 7-to-1 ratio. And Deanna Cochran, who I think Colleen mentioned, talks about by 2030, which is basically 6.5 years, that ratio will be 4-to-1. So it is a really significant situation. The other thing that is so important to know is, as this is a statistic, is that people that are 65 and older, over 20% of them have no children, do not have a support system in place. Or if they do, they actually don't want to engage their family. And so they're creating a family of choice or a care team that they may really want to involve. Like there's a person I'm working with right now who has moving towards end stage Parkinson's, and she actually doesn't want to involve any of her siblings. Her oldest sibling is also suffering from Parkinson's too, but she's been really clear because of family dynamics. But she's doing some of her work in isolation. The caregiver shortage is significant, everyone. It is in almost every aspect of our lives right now, whether it's a nursing assistant, a doctor, a nurse practitioner. Everywhere we go, we're hearing so much about people having to wait for an x-ray, having to wait for a lab draw. Think about urgent care. If nobody's experienced urgent care lately, it is easily 6 to possibly 12 hours waiting just to be seen by a doctor. And people are being asked to go to urgent care by doctors' offices because they can't see people in a timely fashion. And so we have a really significant issue. The other thing that Deanna talked about not long ago is that, you know, hospice in so many ways changed the world. However, it's still not enough. And that's why an end-of-life doula is someone who can help complement the care team, because a doula, hospice folks can only be there for an hour. And I am recently talking with a family, and they have hospice. They've had hospice for 3 weeks. They've seen a nurse once a week, which is no problem for where the individual is, but they've never even seen the social worker yet. And so the end-of-life doula can be a very valuable support system. And so next slide, please. So part of the role of the doula is really about supporting not only the individual, but the family on the journey. And while the journey is the person's, it's also the loved ones as well. And the loved ones doesn't necessarily mean the traditional family of origin scenario. The other piece about this, as we've said before, it's non-medical and non-judgmental. And what we provide is a neutral, calming presence for the individual who may be still very aware of what's going on and wants to be able to do life review and life advocacy, legacy work. And our job as an end-of-life doula is to help demystify the dying process. So we are non-medical support in the home setting, wherever the home may be. And that could be in a person's home, but it could be also in a hospital, adult family home, assisted living. It could be in a retirement community. It can also be end-of-life doula can be in also helping people on an inpatient hospice setting. One that we really love is the hospice, Evergreen Hospice in Kirkland is fantastic. But the end-of-life doula is someone who's providing holistic care. They are actually providing a calm environment. They may be doing healing touch, gentle massage, but most of all, an end-of-life doula is really personalizing the plan of care. So we're planning, preparing, and meeting practical needs. We're also advocates for the individual. Oftentimes you might have family system issues, and some family members want to do it one way for mom, and other family members want to do it a different way for mom. And so our job as an end-of-life doula is actually providing deep listening and gentle guidance so that we get to help honor the wishes of the individual. And as I said before, creating a very peaceful end-of-life process or setting, both of them are true. And a lot has to do with how much we learn about the individual so that we can meet their needs. It's a very honorable and sacred journey that we get to accompany the individual and their loved ones. And sometimes we have the opportunity to also provide that support, emotional, spiritual, physical, and psychological support to the whole family. Next slide, please. So what is the qualities and skills that we need as an end-of-life doula? Well, you see here that one is being the ability to respond to need, but it really is an empathetic heart, the ability to be present, to provide deep listening. And when we talk about deep listening and presence, what we're also talking about, these are symptoms of being able to hold space so that a person can begin to process what it's like to begin this end-of-life journey approach. Compassion is probably one of the most important pieces. And most people that are called to be an end-of-life doula have a great depth of compassion and empathy and ability to be present for the individual at the bedside. The other great skill of an end-of-life doula has to do with being resourceful. I like to consider myself oftentimes what's called a yenta, a matchmaker of needs and services, because sometimes I can't always give a full body massage, but I might know somebody who does Reiki and could be coming into the community. It is multiple levels of on a continuum of what an end-of-life doula can do. I happen to specialize about vigiling. Sorry, stumbling there, excuse me. But vigiling is being at the bedside the last 3 weeks, the last 3 days, the last 3 hours. Then oftentimes we're not always able to be present during the last moment of life. But our job too is also about guiding the family and showing them how to care for their loved one. And a long time ago when I first started, I had a family said, okay, we've got it now. You can go, basically. And at first, because it was one of my first private pay clients, I thought, oh, well, I've done my job. I've helped model what they can do to provide. And of coincidence, what they did is had me come back again and again every day until she passed away. So you never know, and you have to go to the heart of where the individual and their family is, and it's they who are our guides as an end-of-life doula. Bonnie, this would be a great time for you to share.
Thank you. So some of the benefits of becoming a death doula is that we have the opportunity to really work with people who are at a very vital time in their life. They're vulnerable, and we have a chance at this point in time to really make a positive difference in their life. And so I think just it's an honor to be able to do that. You can have flexible hours depending on how you set up your own business, if you're doing it your own business. If you're working with another company like a hospice group or a long-term care, senior care community, you might not have as flexible of hours, but for those of us who do this work, we have a certain amount of flexibility in how we work. So you can work as much as you want or as little as you want. And the other thing that I think being a death doula does is it helps you create connections so that you know other people who are doulas maybe, and you learn where your resources are in the community and where you can get support. So there's a lot of benefits in doing this work. It's really pretty amazing. Can we go to the next slide, please? So there's different types of opportunities for end-of-life doulas. You can work part-time or you can work full-time, depending on how you set up your situation. So if you're starting out as a business, I would usually say you're going to start out working part-time until you build up a clientele. And then you might be part-time, but it can wax and wane depending on where people are in the dying process. So if they're just getting started with a new diagnosis, that's a terminal diagnosis, you might not see them as much in the beginning, or you might see them a lot in the beginning and then not so much as they go through treatment, as they choose to do treatment. And then as treatments aren't working, you might get more and more involved. You can be an independent contractor, and that's what we all are, independent contractors right now. You can charge a retainer just to keep yourself connected with that person. You can job share. That's one of the advantages of a collective too, is that if one of us has a whole lot of clients and maybe two clients are really sick and they need help, they can call us and we can step in and help. Or if we're sick and somebody really needs us, we can call on each other. So, so we provide doula support in person, and I think it's really exciting to go into each new opportunity. No two opportunities are the same, and I think that's one of the challenges and one of the things that I really like about the work. Can we go to the next slide, please? So why should you work with us as a doula collective? I think there's lots of great reasons to work for us. First of all, we offer you a really practical program. And the reason I say that is because most of us have gone through at least 2 doula training programs ourselves. And one of the things that we discovered in doing this is we had so much information thrown at us that it was almost too much. And so one of the things that we did as we put together our curriculum is we picked out the things that you absolutely needed to know to be able to function as an end-of-life doula once you leave our program. But then we, and you're going to hear more about this, but we want to keep you connected with our collective through continuing education. And this is where we're going to give you some additional training that you can participate in as you're able and as you want, depending on how you choose to work as a doula. Some things you might think that's not what I want to do as a doula, but oh, this opportunity is coming up and I really want to do that. So you can, you will have some additional trainings available to you. And I think as a doula, you're a lifelong learner. And so you're always going to be looking for new information to add to your toolbox. Our program is immersive, so you will be involved whether you're doing it in person or online. We do the exact same curriculum, no matter which one it is, and we have ways to make you feel totally connected. Our program is designed by all of us, about 3 of us have an educator background. We've worked at major universities, not only in Washington, but outside of Washington. And we're really, I think we're pretty good at developing curriculum that's interactive and based on what all the theory around adult learners. Community development is another really important piece. When you belong in a collective, you have the collective knowledge of all the people that are part of the collective. And so particularly, I think the 5 of us have made lots of connections over our career, and we can steer you in the direction of some of our contacts and some of the resources that we know about that can help you along the way as you're developing your own resources. So you will start out with resources from us to begin with. And we also are very supportive in your learning process. We are committed to working with you and making sure that you have everything you need. And when you think of our trainings, depending on how many people are in the class, we really average about 1 faculty to 4 students. Maybe 5. Our goal is to get to 20 to 25 students per class, but sometimes we have 8 or 10, and we still run our class. So that's really individualized attention when the numbers are low. But we've seen and we've been in programs where the numbers have been really huge, and it's really hard to get the individual attention that you might need at any point in the training. So I think it's really important. Okay, so I'm passing this off, I believe, to Maureen.
Okay. So the content for our Gentle Passage Doula Collective training, as Bonnie was saying, we put together what we felt doulas need to know. I'm not going to read all the things. These are all our modules that we train on over either our 2-day in-person training or our 8-week virtual training program. So we thought, what do people actually really need to know to get started? And then our training webinars are nice to know, and the continuing education that Bonnie was talking about, that's so important. But one of the things that is very important to all of us is that we have a scope of practice and code of ethics, because there's no regulation around doula work. So you can hang your shingle and say you're a doula. I met someone and I asked her what doula training program she had gone through, and she's like, "Oh no, I helped my brother-in-law. I was with him when he died, and I just feel this calling. So I did some research and stuff and became a doula." Well, that's great, and we need people like that, but there are scopes of practice and code of ethics to follow. There's the National End of Life Doula Alliance and the International End of Life Doula Association that has worked long and hard to make sure that we do have these codes of ethics and we follow them. Right now, as we said, we're unregulated, so probably within the next 5 years we'll have regulation testing. You'll have to have some sort of licensing exam, but there you go. We teach on the legal aspects of doula, everything from pre-death, the act when people are first diagnosed, to the act of dying, to the after death care, and that's what we've taken into account for this doula training. So do you want to go to the next slide, Colleen? Thanks so much. Some frequently asked questions. We keep getting asked, well, I don't have any medical background. Do I need to? And the answer is absolutely no. We don't. You don't need to have a medical background to be a doula. It's really a calling, as we've said throughout the course of this this webinar. It's a calling. You know, you're empathetic. You have a desire to learn and to be present at the bedside or walk on any part of the journey with someone. And oftentimes, you know, all of us in this collective, there's 3 nurses. We have a social worker, a grief coach, and dietitian. Kathleen's a grief coach and dietitian. But in some ways, I find as a nurse, that's a drawback, because when I go in, I have to be wearing my non-medical doula hat, not my medical nursing hat that's there to take care of problems, administer medication, do care. And so it's a whole different role. So sometimes it's much easier to come in without that medical experience, although it's a great adjunct, I can't even say that word now. It's a great complement to your nursing skills. So no, you don't have to have any medical care. The other thing is, okay, there's a virtual training and an in-person training. Which one would be best for me? I would say they're both the same curriculum, the same information. There's something about being in person, if you can, that you connect with the other students in the group. There's just it's so much easier to connect in person. And we've seen some rich relationships developed in that in-person training. And that's one of the things we want to do, is support connections between our students, even past students with present students. But it was surprising. We just finished our first virtual training course, and there was a connection between these people. Asking them, what did you feel? They said they feel like they can pick up the phone, call any of the people in their course, ask them for support or ask questions. And so there was that connection. It's just a little bit different, virtual versus in person. So the choice is really what environment you learn best in. It might be that you're across the country and cannot be in person. So the virtual is a great way to go. How to make money. Bonnie talked a little bit about, you can work full or part-time, but there's so many options now. Start your own doula business. I've been a number of us have been talking with home health agencies that want to integrate doula care into their caregivers' work. They see the need, and they know it's a need that they haven't fulfilled at this time, and it's something that they want to do. So they're talking with us. Hospices are realizing that doulas, it's a great complement to the work they do. And so getting on with hospice, palliative care, and just starting your own business, as we said. And then how do we differ from other programs? Bonnie just went over that. And I would just like to really share that there's some things that I think really make us stand out. Our small group size, as Bonnie said, we're limiting it to 20 to 25 people. So that means there'll always be one educator to 4 to 5 students. And that way we can do one-on-one question answering and guidance and be there to facilitate the small groups that we have, the breakouts within our training. We have educators, as Bonnie said, but what she did touch on the fact that 3 of us have either taught or are currently teaching at the college and university level. There's like over 80 years of adult education experience, but not just adult education. It's teaching nurses and dietitians and different caregivers at a university level. And so that ability to create curriculum is really strong and inherent to these. And I feel very honored to be working alongside these educators. I mentioned that we build community. one of the things is we want to build community. We want them to build community with us 5 educators, but we really want them to build community with our students, with each other, with past students, with future students. That's why we do a monthly group coaching call where anyone can come in, they can ask questions and interact together to get support and maybe bounce ideas off of each other. But it's a controlled group environment where we want them to get to know each other. I think that's about all I have to say on this. I could go on why I love the group we work with. So next steps, our next in-person trainings May 6th and 7th in Bellevue, Washington. And we would love you to register today. We are really excited about this training. So because we want you to have the opportunity to attend, our price is usually $799, but we do have a discount code right now for $100 off. And the discount code, I'll have someone put it in the chat, is May, for the month of May, Doula 100. So that brings the cost down to $699. But that training includes the either 2-day or the 8-week online course, the training. It includes you get 4 of our monthly webinars, the teaching webinars. That's a continuing education. And you also get monthly coaching. So to build that community. And one of the things I'm just losing my train of thought. We also do a monthly death cafe. We want our doulas to be part of that. We want them to experience a death cafe and then go off and start their own. So we're really excited about this. We'd really love for you to consider signing up today to get on and join us on this journey of being part of the paradigm shift about changing the way people look at death and dying, making it much more death positive. Anything else anyone has to add that might be? You can go to our website and register. We have the event up. It's at gentlepassagedoulacollective.com/events. And so now that's the end of our presentation. And we really appreciate you guys coming and being here to join with us and learn about our doula training program. And we would love to answer any of your questions. So ask away.
This is Barbara. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
You can.
All right. So one is on the training. Is there any in person where we shadow or go with and have the experience with one of you in real life? That's one question.
Okay, let's answer that one right off.
Okay.
Kathy is the one that does the most vigiling work. It's a very sacred time of life. So it's hard to shadow at that time of life because it is so emotional, family oriented, and sacred. So there's lots of ways you could get experience. One would be to volunteer with hospice in the beginning. But really to go and shadow at the bedside is very hard. Kathy, do you want to add to that?
It's just a real difficult challenge because you never know what's going to unfold at the time of visits. And so I haven't had anybody shadow me to date, and it's very difficult. I've had master's level students at works shadow me in social work, and that's a whole different ball game. So it's I don't know of anybody actually that does provide that opportunity of shadowing.
Well, it's usually for the same reasons that you've just both mentioned. One of the things is a lot of mentorship takes place, and we have coaching, and there's mentorship one-to-one that doulas do, that you go in and they'll walk you through the steps through a mentorship on a one-to-one, maybe once a week or something like that. But I think Kathy and Maureen, really, I haven't really known anybody. It's usually the reasons that they give because there's so many dynamics going on at that time between the family and the person who's dying. And if they see somebody in there, they may be reticent to even talk. It is a very different time of life. That's what I've found out.
Yes,
And it
I
takes
would.
time. It takes time to build that trust with the doula and the family.
Mhm.
And that's where part of this, the intimacy and sacredness comes. Okay,
Yeah,
Bonnie, you had
thank you.
another
I would
question?
agree. Yeah, I would agree. And thank you very much. And I totally respect that. And I like the idea too of volunteering with hospice. So thank you. And so another question is with the $100 special right now, how long is that good for? Is that up until the May date, or is it only for registering today?
Who wants to answer that?
I don't have the answer. So Maureen,
No, I think no, it's not just for registering today, but it will be by May 1st. I think is the cutoff that we had sort of thrown around there.
Okay,
That's
great.
right.
That's on Monday. Okay, wonderful. It was amazing. It was so informative. Everybody's incredibly articulate, lots of heart, good grounded information. And thank you all very, very much. Fascinating.
Thanks for coming.
and thanks
Okay.
for the feedback.
Georgina, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering with the virtual training, would you offer a in-person session, even if for an hour? Because you said it's hard, it's more difficult to connect with people if you're doing it virtually. I totally understand that. But I just wondered if there might be an opportunity to have an in-person session for like hour and a half or something.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Hybrid.
We really do want to have actually even retreats and regrouping after you graduate, so people have the opportunity to be in person. But when we're doing virtual training, people are all over the place, so it won't be possible for a lot of people to be in person. This summer we'll be planning events, and we're hoping to get graduates, because just even people who are in the Pacific Northwest, to be able to come together so that you can actually see each other in person, but also taking advantage of other events and ways in which you can network with doulas in your hometown or your specific area. We really advocate for that. All of our coaching and webinars will be online, so it can suit anyone at any time, wherever you're living. And just even last week, I was able to do one of these webinars from the East Coast, so it makes it really convenient to stay connected that way. Was that answer?
But yeah, I think it's our virtual, we had people from different states on our virtual training, so it would be very hard to gather that class. But like Kathleen said, we're hoping to put on just events to gather everyone together a few times a year.
The virtual, how long is that? You said it's over 8 weeks?
8 weeks. It's 2 hours, 2-hour sessions over 8 weeks.
Okay.
So you meet once a week for
Fall
2 hours.
session, I'm not able to make the May, but when is the fall session then that you were?
The fall session is October 28th and 29th
That's for the in-person.
for the in-person. And then we have a virtual fall session also. But the fall session will be somewhere, the in-person, we have not determined the location yet, but it will be in the greater Seattle area.
And another aspect too is, Georgina, we have a private Facebook group, the Gentle Passage Doula. And so the graduates are in part of that, so that they're also connecting in that respect too. And coming back to the webinar different people get to, during this last virtual session, actually, the virtual folks were included in a monthly webinar. And so people started to get to meet each other that had,
Webinar.
yep, the training webinar that had met. So that's some of the advantages as well.
Yeah, thanks. There's a question in the chat. from Cassidy. When you say vigil, are there different kinds of specific doula work? So absolutely. So we divide the training up somewhat. The way to kind of think about doula work is preparing people for death, starting the conversations and preparing people for death, being actively involved in the death and dying process, and then also after death care. So I'll just go, and maybe we can go around and just say what kind of work we've done as end-of-life doulas. I think that I don't want to speak for anyone else. Sometimes I forget things that people do, but as an end-of-life doula and grief coach, I mostly do my doula work virtually, coaching other people through the process of death and dying, or after there's been a death through that grief. I've also been a celebrant for a funeral. I've sat bedside, and I have, yeah, that's pretty much, I think. I don't think that there's anything else as a doula that I've been asked to do. And so I think I'm going to just pass this off to Colleen, and you can talk about what work you've done, and we can just go around so people can get a flavor. And then you can reach out to us individually if you have questions too.
Okay, so as an end-of-life doula, I have sat vigil. I have done comfort care, and I have counseled families. I've done work with families. I do a lot of work virtual, but I also like to do it in person, especially if it's in with the territory I do, which is the greater Seattle area. I have two tools I use, Best 3 Months, which is a tool that goes beyond advanced care planning because it looks at the whole person. And I am very passionate about life review and legacy building, or legacy projects, and rituals. I am interested and have done rituals with people. Grief rituals I've been part of, drumming rituals I've been part of. So you can do a lot. I consider myself a conscious dying educator, which means conscious dying means you have a choice with how you want to die. And so that hopefully you get that person before they go into the active dying process. And I'm a coach and educator, conscious dying educator. Maureen?
Oh, great. So
I'm just looking across my screen.
okay. Well, my background is nursing and end of care life fields, oncology, hospice, bone marrow transplant, those type of things. And I started a business for advanced care planning because I didn't even know death doulas existed until I met Kathy Bates here. I had never even heard of a death doula. And I had focused on, so my focus for my doula role is really focused on preparation, hopefully before they ever have a diagnosis, but when they do, making sure everything's in order and facilitating family conversations around wishes. I also do respite care for any of my doulas. I love to be with people at their end of life because it's a very sacred time, and it's something that I really feel passionately about. But like I said, my business was focused on preparation. So that's where I try to stay in my lane. I've done a life celebration. And so we can go in and out, but that's mostly what I do. Bonnie.
Sure. My work is a lot of what I've started to do as a doula is physician visits. And so I have a number of clients that are terminally ill, but they're still in the act of wanting treatment. And so I go with them to the physician's visit. So I meet with them before the visit. We talk about what do they want to get out of this visit? What are their questions for the doctor? And then I go with them into the visit, and I kind of sit in the corner and take notes, and I will cue them if they forget to ask a question that was on their list. And then once the visit is over, we go and have coffee somewhere and sit down and talk about the visit. What did they hear? What did I hear? And then we formulate their next steps. So that's been really helpful for a lot of my clients. I have worked with people who are in the actively dying phase as well. sometimes I get involved because the dying person, I had a young 54-year-old who was dying, but his parents were here who were in their 80s and they were having a lot of health problems. And so I was really there to accompany the parents and walk with the parents as he was going through this dying process. And so that was really a different experience for me. I do advanced care planning too, so I often meet with people again up front. Often it's with the children whose parents are about to die or they're worried about them because they're having memory loss. And so we talk about, can they do advanced directives at this point or not? And I just got a client last week who is someone with beginning stages of dementia, and there's a lot of family issues going on there. So I'll be working through the family dynamics with them. So there's just a lot of different opportunity. I do a lot of different stuff. So just depends on the need and if I'm available.
And then
So I'll pass it off to
Kathy,
anybody who hasn't talked. Kathy, you're the visual queen.
So people can come to me often with 2 or 3 months ahead of time before they're actively going to pass away, or people who are already unresponsive. So I'm contacted by families an awful lot, especially daughters. But I do campaigning for folks preparing life review and legacy projects, as well as very active death and dying process. With the vigiling is probably one of what I consider the most sacred. But I also spend a lot of time with family systems as well, especially difficult family dynamics. It is a specialty of mine because not only the social work, but a geriatric mental health specialist and many years in having owned a counseling service with my husband as well. So I bring a kind of unique skill set, if you will, to the bedside and helping people. And sometimes I'm called, and I had one occasion a few months ago in which I didn't make it. I was seeing one client and I went to the bedside in an adult family home, and the person had passed away. But I sat with the family for another hour and a half so that they could begin to process their bereavement. So you never know what will evolve. And really it is about how things unfold, and they unfold just the way I think they're supposed to. There's no coincidence. Questions?
I think we just have about 1 more minute. We feel free to reach out to us at any time. Is there any last minute questions that anyone has left?
Do you ever have a negative response from the medical team working with the patient?
No, I have not. They have been welcoming.
Yeah.
you know, it's funny because I think Colleen and I have recently had the experience of talking to our primary care providers about what we do. And Kathy, you were in the hospital last year too, and they're just like, we've never even heard it. We want more information. We need, so there's a lot of, I mean, it's really shifted even in the years since I've met and started doing doula work. Just in these last 3 years, the awareness and the desire to learn more by the medical community.
I was in the hospital for 1 week last year, and I talked to 5 doctors, almost every doctor that had worked with me, including the anesthesiologist, and they all were interested in what I was doing. The anesthesiologist shared his own feelings about his father passing away, and that he let other medical care providers take him too far with a lot of unnecessary interventions. And he said he felt so guilty. So it's there and it's happening. Yeah.
I was just going to add that there has been some resistance And I think it's been mostly, well, where I've seen it is mostly with hospice. And a lot of that is because I think initially doula work was a little bit threatening to hospice
Mhm.
people. But now many hospices are embracing the doula mainly because they don't have enough staff to open cases. And as a doula, because we're not regulated, we can at least be with a potential hospice client until they can get the right person in to open a case. And we can be there to kind of provide this overarching support to that family. And I know I had the experience of having a heck of a time getting somebody into a hospice when we were having the COVID outbreak. And, it was only by the grace of God that he got in to a long-term care facility where they provided hospice because he died a week later. And hospice wait list was 30 days.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and what the hospice directors that Kathy and I have been meeting with, they see the limitations. Having been a hospice nurse, my job was to go in for 1 hour, be in there, an hour max is what I had as a nurse. And the caregivers have about 4 hours with them. Even hospice volunteers are limited to 4 hour time frame. And so you can only do so much in that time frame. I ended up volunteering at one point because I'd missed hospice. Um, and they see the value of doulas that can go in for longer. And I really see, I'm going to tell you what I see the value of integrating doula work in with hospice work is that legacy and life review. It's so powerful. They can do the caregiving, they can do that, but to come in and do that legacy and life review, it gives people the ability to unburden their soul, unpack their life, and find meaning and purpose, forgiveness, all of that. And so that's really how I envision it. And talking to this director of a hospice company for Washington, he was right on board with that. So there's a lot of opportunity that's coming along now.
Yeah, and I just want to add, we had a hospice chaplain and we had hospice employees join our training.
Yes.
And we got great feedback from them, seeing the differences and the overlap and the support of one another. There's a lack of caregiving and a shortage. So I think everybody recognizes that.
And even just the one person in hospice telling us, oh, I was never taught what active dying looks like. And that was astounding, but that was part of that educational framework. Bye-bye, Georgina.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you for coming, Georgina.
Thank you.
And we want to respect everyone's time.
Yes.
So feel free to reach out again if you have questions or want to talk to any of us individually. We'd be happy to continue the conversation, and we hope to see you join our training, if not this May, in the fall.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.